Hey, Mr. Howard here with some factoring practice problems. If you haven't been through my steps of how to factor, my 5 steps, then you might be a little bit lost going through here, so go review those if it doesn't make sense. But we want to make sure you have a good understanding, so let's practice. So, first problem here, x squared minus 16x plus 63. So my first step is to factor anything you can out, and nothing comes out of here because it starts with a 1, so there's no common factors. So A would be 1, B would be negative 16, so don't forget that the sign goes with it, and C would be 63. So we're on our way to finding our two numbers, so we need two things that multiply together to give us A times C, which is just 63 since A is 1, and add up to be B, which is negative 16. So a little thought here, the 63 is positive, which means both our numbers have to be the same sign. They're either both positive or both negative. They add up to give you a negative, so the only way that could happen is if they're both negative. So two things that multiply to give you 63. From your times table, the first thing that jumps out is 7 and 9. Do those combine to give you 16? The answer is yes, but we need to make sure we do it right. So since they both have to be negative, we'll use negative 7 and negative 9. And now we're going to put that into our factors, which A is 1, so that'll be pretty easy. It'll be x minus 7. And x minus 9, and since A was 1, nothing can come out. So step 4 looks just like step 3. And since we didn't factor anything out in the beginning, step 5 looks just like step 3 and 4. So that seems like a little overkill to do the same thing 3 times, and I can agree with you. But when the problems get more complicated, involve more steps, you want to remember what those steps are. So this factors into x minus 7 times x minus 9. The next one is going to be very similar. B is, I lost something there, y squared minus 7y minus 18. So once again, look for a common factor, but it starts with 1, so nothing comes out. But you can go ahead and identify your A, B, and C. A is 1, B is negative 7, and C is negative 18. So in this case, we're looking for our two numbers that work here. So A times C would be negative 18, and the two numbers add up to be B, which will be negative 7. So they multiply to give you a negative, which means they're different signs. So we're getting a positive number and a negative number. They add up to have a difference of 7. So a couple things give you 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. But 2 and 9 are the ones that are 7 apart. So 2 and 9 will work, but not just 2 and 9. We have to have a negative, and the bigger number has to be negative since they add up to be negative 7. So 2 and negative 9. Okay. So even though you get the right numbers, or think you have the right numbers, it works. It's best to go ahead and check yourself. Don't be scared to pull out a calculator and double check, because you might find some things that didn't go right in your head at the time. But let's see here. So we're going to set up our two factors. Once again, A is 1, so y plus 2, bringing that down, and y minus 9, bringing that down. A was 1, so nothing comes out. So step 4 is the same as step 3. We didn't pull anything out in the beginning, so step 5 is the same as step 3 and 4. So this factors into y plus 2 times y minus 9. Okay. Once again, you can multiply that together and see if when you collect like terms, if you get the original. The third one here, C, or something I like to do here out of preference. The problem is negative x squared plus 5y plus 14. And there's nothing wrong with that negative out front, but from my experience, I have a hard time working with it. So I'm going to go ahead and make the leap and say I'm going to pull out a -1. One thing that happens if you don't pull out that negative now, it's kind of hard to tell if you should pull it out later, or sometimes you pull out extra negatives and it doesn't come back to the original thing. So if I pull out a -1, that will give me x squared minus 5y minus 14. And in that case, the a will be 1 in front of the x squared, b will be -5, and c will be -14. So make sure you're carrying those signs with them. Now I'm just going to leave that -1 out front alone, and I'm going to bring it back in at the end. Okay? So step 2, I'm looking for two things that multiply together to give me a times c, which will be -14, and add up to be b, which will be -5. Outside of 1 and 14, the only other thing I can think of off the top of my head that will multiply to give you 14 is 2 and 7, and they are 5 apart. So 2 and 7. So once again, since they multiply to give me a negative, one of them has to be negative. 2 and -7 is what will give me the -5 at the bottom. So let's see here. My two factors, my a is 1, so x plus 2 times x minus 7. If I'm following my steps precisely, step 4, nothing pulls out of there since a was 1. But step 5 here, I am going to bring down that -1 from the first step. I told you that we would hold on to it. But not having that negative out front makes life a lot easier. So -1, or just negative out front, times x plus 2 times x minus 7. Okay. Alright, so the last one in this video, D, is 9m squared minus 5m minus 10. So let's see. Step 1. Pulling thing out, 9, 5, 10 do not have a common factor. So nothing comes out in step 1. So A is 9, B is -5, and C is -10. So I'm going to look for my two numbers. So I need two things that multiply together to give me A times C, which is -90, and add up to be B, which is -5. So I need a positive and a negative number that have a difference of 5. So I gotta do a little bit of work here. So let's think. Gives me 90? 1 times 90, but those are not 5 apart. 2 times 45, those are not 5 apart. 3 times 30, those are 27 apart. Does 4 have a factor here? No, 4 does not work, but 5 times 18, those are 13 apart. 6 times 15, but those are 7 apart. And then 7 does not go into 90, 8 does not, 9 times 10, but those are 1 apart. So 6 times 15, those are 9 apart, and 9 times 10, those are 1 apart. So up here, we don't find a pair of numbers that work. Okay. So in that case, if we've exhausted our possibilities and go back through our work and do not find anything, sometimes we will say not factorable, which if we just throw some stuff down on the page, it doesn't mean it's going to break down nicely or break down at all. Sometimes as we reference this to kind of like numbers that won't break down, we might call it prime. It's a weird thing to call an expression, but it kind of applies because you can't break it into two complete expressions here. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, that not everything will factor, and if it does, sometimes you may miss it, but hopefully you catch it if you do.